Hey guys, BuildZoid here, and today I'm going to be going through Asrock's AM5 motherboard lineup and just sort of sharing my thoughts on them. Now, I'm actually going to be sort of going through these with, like, the considerations of, like, I actually want to buy an Asrock AM5 motherboard for testing, which probably isn't the most sensible purchasing decision on my part because, uh, like, Intel 13th gen is just better than Ryzen 7000, except for like the 7950X and 7900X, because the thing is, like, the 7950X especially just offers great performance, like a reasonable price, and it doesn't have E-cores. Which, like, I know if you like using Windows 11, the E-cores work well. Some of us don't like Windows 11, and I still don't like the E-cores. So, yeah, like the 7950X is a really cool CPU, but then you go below that and you sort of, like, 7900X I think is still justifiable, but then you get to like chips like the 7700X and the 7600X, and it's just like a 13700K, even without the E-cores, is still just better than literally every other 8-core CPU that exists currently, right? Except the 13900K, because it's just like the 13700K is just a 12, like, it's 8 of the fastest cores you can get right now, clocked really high with a really good memory controller. It doesn't really get much better than that. Oh, and it also comes with 8 unnecessary Cinebench accelerators, but yeah, so that makes AM5 kind of awkward for me because, like, on one hand, I'd like to test the boards more, but on the other hand, it's like this platform doesn't currently make a ton of sense, unless you're going with the 7950X. But yeah, anyway, so with that unnecessary introduction out of the way, let's get into this. We'll start off with the two X670E Taichi boards. We've got the Taichi Carrara, which is literally just a Taichi with the, like, marble finish on it. So to me, I am completely indifferent to it. Well, I will say I don't particularly like the aesthetic of Asrock's new motherboards. Like, yeah, I don't think they look that good. I also don't think this looks that good. Yeah, but anyway, that's not really the priority here. I do like the one reason I've been sort of really interested in the Taichi boards is I'd love to test this VRM. Um, I'd really love to test it. And the reason I'd love to test it is because ASRock has managed to, like, produce some of the best VRMs that I've ever tested and also some of the worst. But the thing is, on B550, the B550 Steel Legend has amazing voltage regulation for the price. And so I've really, ever since testing that board, I've been really wondering, like, you know, how good is something like an X670E Taichi? And this does have a rather interesting VRM design. Like, we have an absolute truckload of capacitance hanging off of this VRM. Like, this is a ton of capacitors. And then you also have, like, all of these little multi-layer ceramics mixed into it. And just, I really wonder how this performs. Like, this looks like it could be really, really bad, or it could be unnecessarily expensive for no extra benefit. That's sort of the two, like, wait, did I say bad? I mean really, really good, or unnecessarily expensive for no extra benefit. So, yeah, like, this is a VRM I'd be very interested in testing. I also like the motherboard, the fact that this motherboard has dual X8 PCIe slots, which is not as common a feature these days as I really wish it was. Like, part of that is because PCIe Gen 5 redrivers are really, really expensive, but the other part of it is just like, people like their M.2 drives. M.2 drives is why we have less PCIe slots. So, and I'm not a fan of that. Anyway, we do have a manual for this. As you can see, I've already tried to make this video a few times, because that's why it opened up on, like, a specific page. Um, wait, is this the block diagram? Oh man, this is awful. Where's the PCIe assignment? Yeah, so there you have your PCIe switch plus redriver. Yeah, so somebody asked me, I remember seeing a comment under one of my motherboard PCB breakdowns where somebody asked why I call it a PCIe switch when it's more like a PCIe mux, but, like, the motherboard manuals literally call it a PCIe switch. So, yeah, anyway, we've got X16, X8 support, which is cool. And the rest of it, I don't care, to be completely honest. I really don't. The other thing is, like, this board has a lot of SATA ports. Like, in terms of sort of connectors that I care about on a motherboard, this is, like, right up my alley, except for the rear I/O. This, like, it's a good number of USB Type A's, right? It's 8 USB Type A's. That's really, like, that's not bad. That's not something I would say, like, you know, this needs more USB ports, but I wouldn't mind more USB ports, especially considering how ridiculously expensive this board is. And that's the main sort of issue I have with this board right now, is like these in the UK are like £600. Same goes for the regular version. Like both the marble version and the regular one, like they are very, very expensive. And the marble version is even more expensive than the regular one. And so yeah, that's kind of the thing, is like, because it's got a postcode, power button, reset button. Yeah, it doesn't have safe boot, but thanks to AMD, safe boot doesn't work. There's a clear CMOS button in the rear I/O, dual X8, 8 SATA ports, which is something you really don't see on many X670E motherboards. Interesting VRM design, right? Massively overpowered VRM design, but that's a given. It's an X670E motherboard. Like you get an overkill VRM on X670E at like $300. So it's not really, that's the VRM is not even a concern or a consideration in this situation. So yeah, on to the slot spacing. Now that I look at it, like this PCIe slot is like way down the board, right? Like, yeah, they shifted it down by like 2 slots, because usually it's pretty common for like mainstream motherboards to have that first PCIe slot shifted 1 down from the top PCIe slot position, but this is 2 down. That's pretty far down. I'm not really a fan of that, because that means the second X8 is closer to that first X8. And actually, like, this PCIe slot is actually, like, PCIe slot layout is really, like, for a daily system, I actually think it's kind of suboptimal. Because if you put a capture card down here, it'll be restricting airflow to your GPU, which, like, it's not a huge deal. It's not going to massively increase temperatures. It does potentially increase the noise output, though, because you get an obstruction in front of a fan, and fans make, like, a lot of fans will end up making way more noise if there's a obstruction in front of them. Even if, like, they're running at the exact same RPM, they will just get louder because of an obstruction. So yeah, like this PCIe slot layout is, like, at least it's dual X8, but I am not a fan of the physical positioning, or the quantity of PCIe slots. Because for the other thing is, like, if you're getting a capture card or something, you actually don't really want to be going like X8 potentially, right? Like, it would be maybe better to have the capture card going off of your chipset. So like a PCIe X4 slot somewhere on the board would have been nice. Like, I think it would have been best if there was, like, an X4 directly above the primary X16, because that way it's out of the way of the GPU, and it wouldn't, steal PCIe lanes. But there's, like, no motherboards doing that. So, actually, I think the Z590 Tachyon does that, but that's, like, the only board that I can think of that has that style of PCIe layout, where the very first slot is actually going to the chipset, then the second one is for your GPU. But anyway, so yeah, this is a, like, interesting feature, like a really unique feature set for an X670 motherboard, especially thanks to the dual, like 8 SATA ports. It's just so damn expensive, and there's really no reason to get 24 power stages to power your 7950X. Like, the 7950X doesn't pull that much power. It's kind of the thing that makes it attractive as a high core count CPU, in my opinion, is just like, yeah, you get a ton of cores, and it doesn't, pull more than, because the thing is, a 7950X is basically uncoolable past 250 watts unless you plan to delit it. So, like, yeah, it doesn't pull a ton of power, and even at 250 watts, it's a really, really fast CPU. So, yeah. Anyway, so moving on from the Taichi boards, like, those are really interesting. I just wish the price was lower, and I don't think, like, Asrock is overcharging for the feature set compared to the other manufacturers. Like, the dual X8 is actually quite unique. bit restrictive on the PCIe slot arrangement on the flip side. If you like SATA drives, there's more SATA ports on these than on literally any other board. Let's take a look at the Steel Legend, and yeah, I don't like I don't like the look of Asrock's new boards. Oh well. That's one of the I feel like that's one of the reasons I've been like subconsciously putting off making this video. It's just like some of these boards are really ugly. This one isn't even that bad. I mean, I've never really been a fan of the Steel Legend styling, but I feel like this is kind of worse than what they did on the B550. Also, compared to the B550 Steel Legend, or yeah, like there's no postcode on here. The B550 Steel Legend is like totally over, like compared to most modern motherboards, is actually really imbalanced in terms of like build quality and feature set and price. Like it's under $200, has a postcode, great VRM. Yes, it runs a bit warm, but if you just have some airflow, it's fine. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't be using that motherboard for comparisons because it's really unfair. But anyway, so I have a single X16, then it's just a bunch of 3.0. That's weird. Most boards give you like I think most boards give you a 4.0, but not that it really makes much of a difference. Also, I have a sneaking suspicion that's not a full-size X16. Is it? PCIe 2. That's our X16. PCIe 3. X4. Yeah, that's what I thought. Wait, Gen 3? Why? Oh, I guess it's because they're running it all the way down to the bottom edge of the board. And so, for signaling reasons, they dropped it all the way down to 3.0. Because I don't think, like, PCIe 4 already has, like, a bunch of signal integrity issues, so I guess running it all the way down to... They didn't want to deal with that? And so they dropped it down to 3.0? Because I'm pretty sure this could have been 4.0. Like, the actual, like, PCIe connector on the CPU end is 4.0, not 3.0. Wait a minute. No, 16, 4, 4. Then you get your 4 to the chipset. Wait a minute. Is this like USB ports that they decided to turn into a PCIe slot? So maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that is just a Gen 3 link. Anyway, like that is perfect actually for like a capture card. Like this is actually, if you're getting a capture card, this is actually like ideal. It's a mile away from your GPU and it connects directly to the CPU. And that's not generally that important, but I have run into weird issues with having devices like PCIe cards connecting to the chipset and then to the CPU. So, ideally you want to connect everything directly to the CPU if you can. So this actually, like, that PCIe slot for, like, a capture card is ideal. That is, it literally perfect for that application. And then you also get an X1 slot in just kind of the most awkward location possible, but X1 is the kind of thing that you'd use for, like, a Wi-Fi card or something, so I don't think it's too much. Like, and those cards don't tend to be that large. Well, I mean... You might still run into the issue of like you put the card in and then the GPU fans end up being noisier than before, but it's less of a concern than when you have a really big card in front of a GPU. Anyway, so I like the PCIe layout on this a lot. Like, well, I mean, that X1 slot is a bit awkward, but on the other hand, they did manage to get all of the M.2 drives away from the exhaust of the GPU. And this is one thing I've been wondering for a while. is like, I think a motherboard like this, where you have just a big open space directly under your main PCIe slot, will actually have somewhat better GPU temperatures than motherboards that have a bunch of covers in that area. Because you'll just have, like, most GPUs try to exhaust some amount of heat down towards the motherboard. And so not having a great big, like, M.2 heatsink or something down there could actually help GPU temperatures a bit. It's not really something I've tested, but it is something I've always kind of suspected like might be the case. So yeah, so I like the way this motherboard's PCIe stuff is set up. Um, oh, this is my kind of rear I/O. You get BIOS flashback, no clear CMOS. Dual LAN. You get one. What is that? Realtek 2.5 gig, Realtek 1 gig. I'm not really a fan of that. I feel like if you're gonna do, because I don't think you can team them or anything, so I think it would have made more sense if it was like Intel 1 gig and then Realtek 2.5, so that like you have two different vendors. If you don't like the drivers from one of them, you can just use the other one for or yeah, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, you do get dual LAN, so if you have like a different use, if you have a use for that, then that's kind of cool, I guess. It does have an optical out. And there's just a ton of USB ports, right? This is what, like 13? No, 11. It's 11 Type A's as well as a Type C. There's BIOS flashback, Wi-Fi 6E. Yeah, Wi-Fi 6E. And for the power delivery, we're looking at a 16 plus 2 plus 1. I'm not sure that it's actually phases. It might actually be an 8 plus 2 plus 1 and then just two power stages in parallel in each phase. 60 amp smart power stages, so that should handle a 7950X no problem. Like, even without a VRM heatsink, it should handle a 7950X. Did they mention what the layer count is? This is probably an 8-layer PCB, isn't it? Yeah, 8-layer PCB, so the VRM will really have no issues whatsoever. It comes with a graphics card holder. That's nice, I guess. Oh, you do get troubleshooting LEDs, but yeah, there's no postcode on this, which I think really kind of sucks. Then again, at the price point that I think this board is at, that's kind of standard, so yeah. I can't, like, that's not like ASRock being cheap, that's just like motherboard manufacturer. Motherboard manufacturers just don't include postcodes very often these days. On, like, cheaper boards. Blazing OC tuner. Oh, so it looks like ASRock has the same thing that like Asus and Gigabyte have, with the dynamic switching from PBO to static. Wait, anti-drop screws. Oh, they mean the. Everybody does this now, and it's nice. Like, I really like this. I don't think it really adds a lot of cost because they just have to thread the hole in the M.2 heatsinks. Actually, yeah, so they just have to thread the holes in the M.2 heatsinks, and then they put in a screw that isn't threaded all the way, and the screw doesn't have a tendency to, like, you don't have the screws, like, you don't have to worry about losing the screws anymore because they just stay with the heatsink. But this is super common these days. Yeah. I don't even know, like, which manufacturer did it first, but I've just kind of noticed with a lot of the motherboards that I've been taking apart for, like, recently been disassembling for PCB breakdowns, like, all of them come with captive screws now, for this kind of thing. Like, not for your other heatsinks. Your other heatsinks still have regular screws, but at least the M.2 heatsinks, the screws don't run away from you. So, yeah, that's nice. But anyway, that board's just kind of standard motherboard. And we have the X670E Phantom Gaming Lightning. 14 plus 2 plus 1. Well, power stages. 70 amps smart power stages. Oh, that should power a 7950X no problem as well then. That's a lot of USB Type A, and I do like to see that. No Wi-Fi on this. 2.5 gig LAN, BIOS flashback, no optical audio output, if that's something you care about. Well, layer count. 8 layer? Yeah, 8 layer PCB. This board's kind of ugly in my opinion. I don't like the, like, I don't mind, like, creative, like, silk screening to, like, for some extra visual flair, but this right here, I don't like it. Like, I feel like this would look better if the board was just black. Yeah, it would just look better if this board was just, like, and and I say that as somebody who hates the fact that most modern motherboards try to be as just a black rectangle as much as possible, right? Like if you look at an X670E Taichi, this is pretty much a black rectangle with a gold stripe on the edge. That's it. But then you have a board like this where I almost feel like they're doing this design with the silk screening to make the board look worse. Because it, in my opinion, does. Like, it's just visual noise for no real reason to me. So I don't like this. I think it would look better if it was just black. Or, I don't, like, honestly, I would have preferred it if they just, like, plastered their, like, the Asrock, like, logo across the entire board or something. Because to me, yeah, I don't like it because it's visually, it's nothing. It's just visual noise, and I don't like it. Like there's no real pattern to it, no reason. It's just kind of there, and it's just ugly, in my opinion. But luckily, it doesn't affect performance. But yeah, I wish they wouldn't do this because, like honestly, like old low end motherboards are nicer to look at than this is because they didn't yet get all creative with their solder masks. I mean, with the silk screening, not the solder mask. The solder mask is the black part. That's fine. I don't want the brown solder mask. That looked horrible. But yeah. Anyway, oh, these are DR Oh no, right. Technically, smart power stages are like a subfamily of DR MOS components, because smart power stages have an integrated driver as well as the two MOSFETs. Yeah, 14 plus 2 with 8-layer PCB. Wait, this doesn't have a 2-ounce copper layer? What? That doesn't seem right. That's like a standard feature of modern motherboards is to have 2-ounce copper. Or do they just not mention it at random? Oh, they just randomly don't mention it. Yeah. Because this... Yeah, here they say 2-ounce copper. I can guarantee you there is no way in hell that this board doesn't have a 2-ounce copper power and ground plane. No way that they're not doing that. Because it, like, that would be bad if they didn't. Yeah, so that just seems to be random. Okay, so that doesn't mean anything. This almost certainly has it too. And when I say almost certainly, I mean like 99.999% certainty, because there's no way. Like 2-ounce copper layers for motherboards for like the power and ground are standard for like years now. Like even cheapo 4-layer boards will use 2-ounce, like 2-ounce copper thickness for the like big power planes because you need that for your power planes and ground. So yeah. Anyway, so VRM wise, this looks perfectly fine. Looks like it also uses the same memory topology as all the other boards. Also comes with the anti-drop screws. It's just a really ugly motherboard. I also just realized I didn't talk about the networking on the Taichi at all, did I? Oh, it's 2.5 gig killer. So that's rebranded Intel as far as I know. And then you also have rebranded Intel Wi-Fi. But, yeah, so I just wish this board was just black. to be completely honest. Yeah, if they didn't do the silk screen, I think, like, I'd be willing, like, you know, like, if I'm choosing a motherboard to test, I guess it doesn't really matter that it's ugly, but, like, if I have the option to get something less ugly, I'll go for the less ugly one. So let's check out the X670E Pro RS. So that's all of the X670 Asrock boards. I actually like how this looks. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't do something similar to what they did on this. Right? Like, it's the same kind of, like... yeah, I just don't like the fact that this is like a random line pattern, whereas like this actually has some kind of design to it. So, anyway, this looks fine. And 14 plus 2, this is the same board, isn't it? Actually, this has a better PCIe slot layout. Well, that's stupid. Oh, and it's a lot better. It's not even like a little better. Like this is X16, then you get X4 and an X... Oh, you get an X1, X4, X1. So actually, let's check the manual. This is really dumb. Like, I understand not having a bunch of X16s maybe, but like, why not have an X4 on the very bottom? Or like when I say X16s, like these are X4s. Like physically, yes, the plastic is for X16, but electrically those are X4 slots. Where is that user manual? There we go. Actually, they probably mention it in the connector section, don't they? Actually, that's probably even on their website in specifications. Yeah, they run X4, X16 running X1 and an X16 running X4 off of the CPU, and that's Gen 3. Wait, is it? No, that's PCIe 4. Yeah, wait. That's PCIe 3. Oh, I don't like this layout. Yeah, so this is 4.0, but, like, it's not the end of the world, but, like, it's, in my opinion, it's a bit too close to the X16 slot, the primary one. So, yeah, I wish the X4, like, X4 should be, like, second to last or very last PCIe slot, in my opinion. Or it should be above the X16. That's sort of the best locations for it. You want to get it away, like, as far away from the heatsink for the GPU as possible, basically. So you either put it behind it, or you put it way down. Not right here. Because actually, I think there's, like, RTX 4090s right now that if you put them into this motherboard... Like, you won't be able to use the X4 slot anymore, right? And there are things like there's capture cards that are X4. And if you put them in X1, like, you're not going to have enough bandwidth. So, yeah, this does still have troubleshooting LEDs. Oh, and it only has 4 SATA ports. Ew. Yeah, I don't like this very much. Like, it's not, like, there's nothing particularly wrong with the build quality. But I am not a fan of what it looks like. The rear I/O is nice. I'll give Asrock that. This is a good rear I/O. Otherwise, I'd be yeah. So, I like the rear I/O, but yeah, this board's a bit... Then we have the X670E Pro RS, where it's like, okay, so this looks nice. You get your 6 SATA ports, and then it's just like no PCIe slots. Like, like, yeah, like there's just no X4 slots. Like, why? M.2 slots were a mistake, as far as I'm concerned. We should like M.2 SSDs should just come with PCIe adapters as standard, and then we should just have more PCIe slots. Anyway, oh, and the rear I/O, wait a minute. What the hell, Asrock? No, seriously, what? So this is 2.5 gig. There's a Type C here. There's a Type C here as well. That's 2.5 gig. Oh, you get an optical. But there's just like a 9 Type A's versus 11? Yeah, 11. This board costs more. Oh, they put Wi-Fi 6E on here as well. But this is the more expensive board, and it just has, like, less features. Trying to figure something out. Wait, no, this is on a 14+2. How they're so... Like, Asrock has a lot... Like, these boards are all very different from each other. Like, this is, in my opinion, the best looking of Asrock's, like, X670E boards, and unfortunately, the one I like, in terms of internal connectors, the one I like the least. Like, this is a good PCIe slot layout. This is an acceptable PCIe slot layout, and then we have this thing where it's like, why is this even an X670E motherboard? Because, like, the only thing X670E is about is how many PCIe slots you get, thanks to the chipsets. And it's like, where are they? So, yeah, I guess Asrock's intent is to sell this motherboard on looks alone, because it does look better than everything else in their lineup, in my opinion. But in terms of functionality, I am not very impressed. Also, Realtek 2.5 gig, Realtek 2.5 gig and 1 gig, and then Realtek 2.5, yeah. Still the same memory support. I'm surprised that they claim up to 6600, considering Ryzen really doesn't do speeds that high. And in fact, their QVL doesn't even have any speeds that high in their QVL, which incidentally, 6400 on Ryzen 7000 is a matter of luck. Some CPUs just won't do it. 6200 will work on basically every CPU, but 6400 not always. If you're going for like full stability. You can boot it on basically any CPU, should be possible, but full stability is a different matter. Anyway, so that's the X670 boards, and I think in terms of feature set, like Steel Legend is nice. But I wish it was less ugly. Also, like, nice VRM heatsinks, but like the VRM heatsinks aren't a concern when you've got a 16 power stage VRM. Yeah, and the Pro RS is just like, I guess if you don't care about the kind of weird lack of, like, if you don't need a lot of PCIe slots, then this is fine, I guess, but I think actually if you like want M.2 heatsinks, there's motherboards from other manufacturers that have better M.2 cooling in this price range. So I'm not very I'm not very impressed with this board. So Steel Legend and Taichi are cool, but the other two are kind of I don't even really know why they're X670. Anyway, we've got the B650E Taichi. And I'm very sad about this motherboard, because at a glance you might look at these two X16 slots and go like, oh, this does dual X8 like the bigger type, like the X670E Taichi does. And you'd be wrong about that. Because what it actually is by 4 from the chipset. Like, it's not even from the CPU, it's from the freaking chipset. So I am very upset about that. Like, very, very upset about that. That is the main, like, when I first saw pictures of this board, I was thinking, like, oh, I'll just buy this instead of the X670 version, because it's got the same VRM, and it'll still do X8. And then I finally saw the specs, and I was like, oh, no, it doesn't do dual X8. It does X16 and X4 off of the chipset. Like, to be fair to Asrock, that's not exactly abnormal for a B650E motherboard to do. It's just like, I was really hoping there would be like a cheap way to get dual X8 PCIe slots, and there isn't. Also, this board's not cheap. This board's like really, I think in the UK it goes for like 450 quid when I last checked. So, like, this thing is very expensive, and really the only thing you're getting, in my opinion, is a massive VRM, and then everything else, well, okay, a ton of USB Type-A, I'll give them that. And I do like a ton of USB Type-A. I do. But you only get 4 SATA ports, which is because the B650 chipset just doesn't have that many lanes available. You do get a postcode power button, reset button, but the the pro like this is basically a VRM and a bunch of USB ports as a motherboard. And like, to be fair, that's kind of, you know, in well, like that, like on a surface level that sounds like the kind of thing I would like, but this, like, the VRM is so overkill that it's just unnecessary. Like, if they literally removed half of the VRM, half of it, just so I could have a dual X8, I'd take it. I'd rather have dual X8 on the PCIe slots than 24 power stages, especially since they're using 105 amp smart power stages. Like, we don't need 24 of them. The 7950X doesn't pull that much power. Plus, it even has heat sinks, which I know is standard for VRMs, but like, this VRM will do it without heat sinks. So, yeah, like, I feel like this is too far cut down from the X670E Taichi to really make sense. Could be an interesting, like, LN2 overclocking motherboard, because I have a sneaking suspicion that that it might be the same for LN2 overclocking. Not 100% certain. There might be some like extra auxiliary voltages that like this doesn't let you adjust that the Taichi, the X670E Taichi does. But this is Asrock, and they don't really do that kind of thing. That's more in line with like Asus, where like ROG boards will often have extra voltage settings that you don't get on the like Strix boards and other ROG boards. With Asrock, like, even the cheapest boards will often have voltage settings that are like relatively advanced overclocker stuff. So just because Asrock can't be bothered to like disable the functionality in the BIOS, and the voltage regulators are the same, so it's like, well, it's the same voltage regulator, so it supports the same functionality, and we can't be bothered to remove it from the BIOS. To be fair, Gigabyte does the same thing, as well as I think MSI most. I think MSI mostly does that. It's just like with MSI, there's some voltages that are just kind of miss. Like, there were a few cases where they just didn't have a setting across their entire lineup. So, yeah, that's sort of a different matter. Yeah. So overall, like, I like this. The price is too high, and it doesn't do dual X8, which I find incredibly disappointing. Also, this PCIe slot is, again, like, as an X4 for a capture card, it's too close to the X16. Put it at the bottom of the board. I guess Asrock's decision to put it up here is that it puts the M.2 drives further away from the GPU, which I guess is good for, like, that'll be good for your M.2 drive temperatures, but like, I don't think the X4 slot should be that close to the X16. Also, why is there a bunch of capacitors down here? Like, it's not weird to have capacitors by your PCIe slots for, like, extra power filtering, but, like, why is there 3 of them? That's, like, a lot. Like, usually you'd expect, like, one 16-volt cap and one 6.3-volt cap for the 3.3-volt rail. Why is there 3? I am very confused. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything. It just looks weird. There's also seemingly voltage regulators down here. For the chipset? Am I missing something? I don't like how also they highlight, like, 2 Gen 5 X16 slots. Wait a minute. This is just straight up... Wait, is it? Where is it? Connectors. Wait. Slots. It's not Gen 5. It's straight up wrong. Yeah. See? So this is just wrong. Straight up. Like, this is just completely incorrect. They're not dual Gen 5 X6. Like, this one goes to the freaking chipset. So, just no. Anyway, I don't think I'm missing anything. So that is interesting. There's like a whole lot of power delivery stuff down there. I wonder what it's for. I wonder if the X670E version has that too. Because, like, if I'm going to be spending kind of a lot of, like, kind of too much on a motherboard, I may as well get the one that does everything instead of the one that just does almost everything. Oh, well, we can't see on this one. Oh, that's a shame. Well, anyway, moving on, we've got the B650E Steel Legend. At the very least... Oh, looks like that's the same VRM as they had on the X670 version. Yep. Was the PCIe slot layout also bad? Wait a minute. Does this only have 2 SATA ports, or am I blind? No way, right? It has 2 SATA ports. Oh my god. It has 2 SATA ports. Are you kidding me? 2! Like, I get that the B650 chipset doesn't have that many lanes, but 2 SATA ports. Okay, well, I guess no, like, bulk storage for you then. I mean, I guess you shouldn't be hooking up that many drives to your daily system anyway, but... Interesting that they claim 6400 plus for this board, and yet it has like the same QVL that they have for boards like this, which this claims support up to 6600. Yeah. Oh well, let's keep going. So, 8-layer PCB again. Like, the thing is, this will still have no issues powering, like, a 7950X, but... What? Is there no rear I/O photo? Aw. Oh, this is... Okay, there's 7 Type A's and a Type C. 7 is good. 7, or more like, no, 7's not good. 7 is acceptable. Like, that is not... Like, once we go below 7 USB Type A ports in the rear I/O, that's when I start complaining, because that's when it's an issue. In my opinion. Like, that's when it's like, where am I going to plug all my stuff in? Above 7 is like, okay, like, above 7 is like, I actually don't know what I would plug into it, but I can imagine that there are people out there who have even more peripherals than I do, and for those, that's nice. But yeah, like, I think, I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure the minimum I need is 7 Type A ports. It might be 8 at this point, but yeah. Anyway, you get Wi-Fi 6E, of course, which is kind of standard on like a lot of the more expensive motherboards these days. I don't like the PCIe slot layout. You get troubleshooting LEDs. No postcode, of course. Oh, that's another thing. Do I really want to pay money for a motherboard with no postcode? I mean, it is a Ryzen motherboard, so the postcode isn't really that helpful anyway, but... Well, I'm not sure. Like... So, I personally don't like this board very much. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, but... Like, the AM5 platform, in my opinion, is a bit awkward. And it might be just because I really don't care about, like, PCIe Gen 5 storage. Because, like, I don't copy files all day. I don't need it to be that fast. Or more like, usually when I'm copying files, it's to a different drive that's way slower than my main storage. And I use a SATA SSD. Oh wait, this isn't LEDs. This is actually just like blue. Oh, cool. I did not know that. What is this? 14 plus 2, up to 6600. Man, Asrock's like memory speed advertisements are just like random numbers, aren't they? How's the rear I/O on this? This is nicer than this. Is it? Yes, it is. This is just straight up 9 USB Type-A ports. Now, admittedly, a lot of them are slower. Are they? Oh, no. Yeah, they are. Because these are 5 blue ports versus 3 blue ports. But for me, like, USB Type-A ports are about quantity, not speed. So, yeah. It's the same VRM as I think the, like, lower-end X670 boards. Actually, Asrock straight up mentions what power stages they use, which is really cool. Yeah, 60 amp smart power stages, so that's good. That should have no problem powering a 7950X. It still has a 8-layer PCB, so yeah, and it comes with VRM heatsinks. Nothing to worry about. There is a temperature. Troubleshooting LEDs over here. Oh, we have a better PCIe slot layout on this, and 4 SATA ports. Man, Asrock's internal connector like configurations are mind-boggling, because they're just all over the place. Like, the PCIe slots move to like random locations for reasons I don't understand. The SATA ports are like, there's no SATA ports here, 4 SATA ports here. Like, I'm pretty sure this is the cheaper board, isn't it? Yes, it is, because it has worse rear I/O. So yeah, like, it is bizarre to me how like this has a better PCIe slot layout than this does. Like, that's just weird. And said PCIe slots are, and this one's even connected to the CPU. Look at that. Like, that's so awesome. You get an X4 all the way at the bottom of the board that goes to the CPU, and it's X4 by Gen 3. So, like, it's not even that slow, really. Right? Like, that's like 2.0 X8 equivalent. So, yeah, so I like this. I like this. I don't like the color blue, though, so... that's fun. But I do like this board. Like, I like the rear I/O. Yeah, it's not a really, like, if you need high-speed ports, then I guess this isn't for you. But if you're like me, where it's just like, no, I have a mouse, a keyboard, a webcam, an audio, like a sound card, a printer, and there's also like a USB cable that I use as like an option cable for, what is it? Like various like controller type things and the Arduino. Oh, and an Arduino sometimes as well. Um, yeah. Oh, and I have the drawing tablet. So like, I just need a ton of Type A. It doesn't really need to be very fast though. I don't hook up storage devices to the back of my motherboard. So yeah, that's what the front panel ports are for, right? That's where you plug in your USB drives, that kind of thing. And the rear I/O is for like permanently attached devices and an extension cable. Because like the thing is, I usually use the controllers on like all the like the microcontrollers. I usually use them on the like opposite end of my desk. So I have a like 2 meter. Actually, might be a like I have a USB Type A like extension cable that just runs along my desk over to the area where I usually use the microcontroller stuff. So yeah. Anyway, like I like this. This is so far my favorite motherboard from Asrock. That is like at a reasonable price because obviously the Taichi boards have a stupid PC like. Okay, it's not stupid. If you're actually running SLI, then this PCIe slot layout is actually sort of necessary, but it's not my favorite PCIe slot layout. Whereas the Riptide down here, like this is a really good PCIe slot layout for like a daily setup where, you might have a GPU capture card, maybe like it comes with Wi-Fi, so you wouldn't have a Wi-Fi card, but I don't know, maybe you could get a 10 gig card in PCIe Gen like X1 or something. So, yeah, like I like this board a lot. I just like I wish it had a postcode that would make it that much better. But uh, yeah, like this is currently sort of top of the list for like boards I would consider testing at this point. Anyway, now we have the B650E Phantom Gaming ITX board. And solid rear I/O for an ITX board, right? We've got 7 USB Type A's, 2.5 gig, 2.5 gig Intel LAN. Wait, what's on this? Intel as well. Interesting. And what else do we have? VRM wise, it looks like 105 amp smart power stages on V-Core, 10 power stages. Yeah, so this is a great, like this VRM should have absolutely no issues powering your CPU. What's the layer count on this? 10 layers? 10 layers, yeah. ITX board. Extra layers because there's not enough space. The thing is, like, with Ryzen... Oh, it looks like this actually... Wait a minute. Wait a minute, Asrock. How does this work? So is the QVL lying, or is this just incorrect? It could be both ways. Like, with Asrock, you never know, which is kind of the whole issue. Like, I'd be surprised if this was actually the limit of the board. Well, actually, no. Like, ITX motherboards are in this sort of awkward situation where, like, if there's enough space to do a good memory topology, ITX boards get an advantage because they put less load on the memory controller by having less DIMM slots. Not that that really helps a Ryzen 7000 series CPU because the memory controller really doesn't do high memory speeds, but doesn't really do very high memory speeds, but yeah, like if you have a memory controller that can do high memory speeds, less DIMM slots is better. This right here, but with ITX boards, you also can end up with like a terrible memory topology because the board has too many features relative to how big it is, and so compromises need to be made in order to get everything to fit, including the memory. So, yeah, like this board, like the other nice thing about ITX boards is like they don't take up much space in between testing, right? Like they're easy to store, which is nice. But on the flip side, they also have like weird, like ITX boards are kind of wacky. Like they come in sort of extremes because on another benefit that they tend to have is because the power plane is like, or more like because the VRM's rammed right up against the CPU socket. They can often have like a voltage regulation advantage because the power plane is just super duper short. So yeah, like test results from an ITX board are not generally going to be reflective of the rest of the motherboard lineup from that manufacturer. Though with some manufacturers, every board performs completely differently anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter what you test. You need to test almost all of them. So yeah, and Asrock is actually one of those manufacturers because like I tested Z390 and Z370. So I tested a Z370 Extreme 4 ATX board, terrible. Like literally the worst Z370 motherboard I tested. And then there's the Z390 Z390 Phantom Gaming ITX, best one of the best motherboards I tested. Straight up like straight best ITX board I tested and almost best like also one of the best out of any board that I tested in terms of voltage regulation. So yeah, like that's kind of the unfortunate. Like so, ITX boards sort of can be really good or really bad, and nothing in between in my experience. And also, they're not reflective of the rest of the motherboard lineup because of that. But still, this is a really interesting board. It looks good. Like, it's surprisingly good rear I/O for an ITX board. You do only get 2 SATA ports, but, you know, it's an ITX board. There's not that much space. Actually, because it's an ITX board, there's just not that much of anything on it, right? Do you even get 2 M.2 slots? You do. So one of them has to be on the back, right? Yeah, there's one on the back. I kind of wish they had a picture of the back of the board. Oh, they have different the pictures here for the VR. Yeah, I wish I could see like the capacitor configuration on the back of the board. But this could be like like this is a VRM I would love to have measurements for. Unfortunately, it's also just like like the measurements from this board would literally only apply to this board. So that's kind of the reason why it might not be the ideal test subject because it's like not very useful for more general conclusions. Whereas like this VRM, I think Asrock is just copy pasting it around for a few of the boards. Like it's probably the same. Like yeah, this and this probably share VRM designs. Except maybe they change the power stages, which doesn't really, like, that doesn't really tend to, that'll improve the efficiency potentially, but it won't change really, like, it generally won't change the voltage regulation performance. Anyway, so that's the ITX. Then we have the live mixer. Oh no, the website's gotten more fancy. I love this color scheme. I am so happy to see that we now have colorful motherboards again instead of just black motherboards with RGB chicken pox. Right? Because like there's a lot of motherboards where they just kind of stick some random RGB LEDs on them and it's like, look, it's RGB now. And it's like, the board is primarily black. So, you know, like I do not appreciate motherboards that are black with a colorful skin condition. It's not really that interesting to look at. This, on the other hand, this is cool. I mean, I'd prefer it if it was like actually orange instead of like red and yellow, but close enough to being orange. Though I do believe this is the same thing as one of the other boards we've looked at. Okay, at least once we get to the specs page, everything functions normally. Yeah, this looks suspiciously like the Steel Legend. Oh, whoa, this rear I/O. Damn, that's a lot of USB ports. I like it. They ditched the Wi-Fi, apparently. Did they? Yeah, they did. Oh, and you get... Are they reasonably laid out? Got two PCIe 2 is... As long as you don't have a 4-slot GPU, like... Yeah, this will work. So you get by 4 by 4. You don't get very many, like, you only get 2 SATA ports on this board as well, which is unfortunate, but that's just a limitation of the B650 chipset. I still don't like it, though. I wonder, like, so this seems to be the same VRM as the... Actually, it could still be basically the same VRM as the Steel Legend, depending on, like, what, like, they could literally be using the same VRM controller and just removing, like, 2 power stages. That could also be true for the Riptide. I maybe should look that up. Yeah, I wonder if that information might not be available somewhere on the internet already, but, yeah, so this is basically like a good PCIe slot layout. Not my favorite PCIe slot layout, but a good one. And an absolute ton of USB Type A. And I do like that. I wish it had a postcode. I really wish it had a postcode. The thing is, I feel like this board probably costs extra, and if I'm just testing it, then there's not really much point for me to go for it. Because, like, there's no way I'd ever daily this thing. Because it doesn't have enough SATA ports for my daily system. Like, literally, it just does not have enough SATA ports for my daily system. So that's a bit unfortunate. B650 Pro RS. Oh, this looks okay. Yeah, this looks okay. 14 plus 2. It's the same VRM. What else do we have? 2.5 gigabit LAN from Realtek. And we've got X16 and... Oh, so this actually has... Wait, this is the same thing as the Riptide then. Oh, they ditched one of the M.2 heatsinks and... No Wi-Fi. Wait a minute. Is this just a cheaper version of the Riptide? It is. Oh, that's perfect. I can get, like... Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same board. For less money. It's perfect. I mean, you lose out on M.2 heatsinks, but... I don't care about that. I don't use M.2 drives. It doesn't affect me. It does have troubleshooting LEDs. Solid number of Type A ports. Yeah, I like this. Like, this is... In terms of feature set, this is right up my alley. And this should still be able to power a 7950X with no issues. B650 Phantom Gaming Lightning. Oh no, it's got the horrible freaking gray random gray mess all over it. Oh, this has a nice rear I/O. Yeah, that's a lot of Type A USB ports again. The PCIe slot layout is not that great. Oh, it's only got 2... Wait, no, it's got 4 SATA ports. There's 2 hanging out down here. This board is, like, weirdly empty. And the gray, like, gray mess is that, like, I really don't like it. Wait a minute. How many M.2 slots does this have? 1, 2, 3. It's kind of low. Or at least that seems a bit low. Well, oh, no, that seems to be normal for Asrock. Okay. Not that I really care, but it is something that, like, I think a lot of other AM5 boards are just absolutely packed with M.2 slots, so only seeing 3 of them is kind of surprising. This is still the same VRM, but unfortunately, I am not buying a board that looks like this when I can have a board that looks like this. Though I wonder which one is cheaper, because it isn't immediately obvious to me. I do want to actually look that up. So we're going to go to PC Part Picker. And I am currently set to the United Kingdom, so... Oh man, it's 245. It's 250. That's a lot. That's like in the same price range as like Z6, like low-end Z690 boards. M5. And the Lightning is 229. Yeah, that's not enough of a price decrease. Now I'm starting to suspect that Asrock is making these ugly on purpose. Because, like, this is kind of just a better rear I/O. Same VRM. Yeah, it is just better in terms of rear I/O. Same VRM, worse heat sinks, which really shouldn't matter because, you know, 7000 series doesn't pull that much power. Worse PCIe slot layout. Significantly worse PCIe slot layout. Because I've now noticed that, yeah, you only get one CPU slot instead of two. Oh, these are X2 as well. They're not even X4. Oh, that is like a lot worse. I like X2 devices are like admittedly, I've not looked into that many exotic PCIe add-on cards, but generally, like, you have your X1 stuff, and then you have, like, X4, X8, and X16 stuff. X2 is one of those, like, I know it's technically possible, but I can't immediately think of anything that I've seen with an X2 connector. Like, there's networking cards and, like, audio cards and even some capture cards that are on X1. And then I've seen a lot of capture cards on X4. And then you have, like, your GPUs that are, like, in X8 or... Actually, AMD now has some GPU... Well, is there some GPU from AMD that's on X4? There's no way. It has to be X8. Like, I'm not going to look that up right now. But anyway, so, yeah, like, most stuff, like this... It usually goes 1x, 4x, 8x, 16x, and 2x is like... I'm sure there's some devices that use by 2, but I am not aware of what that would be. You could still probably adapt that into an M.2 slot if you wanted to. You just wouldn't have a ton of bandwidth on it, but... Yeah, so this board... Like, the rear I/O is nice. I'll give it that. You do still get troubleshooting LEDs, but those are kind of standard. Also, where are they? Wait a minute. Does this not have LED? It has to have them. There's no way. Okay, well, we gotta go grab the manual because there is no way that doesn't have troubleshooting LEDs. If this doesn't have troubleshooting LEDs, then it's just terrible. Do they even label them in the manual? Because on the Pro RS, they're right there. In the corner. And on this, we have some MOSFETs in that area. Asrock occasionally puts them along the bottom edge as well, but there's nothing down here. Like 230-pound board, and it doesn't even have... Oh, no, they've shoved them up above the memory slots. Yeah. Yeah, okay, they just moved them into a slightly different location. So it does have them. Wait, are they not labeled in the manual? Oh, they are. They're up here. It's just not immediately obvious. They look kind of like a fan connector or something. And okay, so you get troubleshooting LEDs. It's not like it's not completely terrible. It's just ugly. It's just a very ugly motherboard. It's not also bad. Okay, let's check out the MATX Riptide, and that comes in Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi versions. The non-Wi-Fi version is... Wait, is it actually that... Whoa. Oh, and we even have pictures of the back of it. Nice. Wait, that means I can check out a picture of the back of the ITX one, can't I? Oh, this is... Yeah, man. I bet the voltage regulation on this is really good. Like, really, really good. Because that is all SMD polymers, tantalum input filtering, and therefore also not at all comparable to any of the other boards in Asrock's lineup. Except, yeah, like, straight up not comparable. Not necessarily, like, that it... Like it's so different in terms of its design that, like, you can't compare it. Not necessarily that the same level of performance can't be achieved. There are like many ways to design different voltage regulators with roughly the same performance when it comes to the voltage regulation side of things, because you ultimately everything ends up bottlenecked by the CPU socket itself. Anyway, this is currently not available in the UK, and on Newegg it's 320 quid. Though I think I've seen some pre-order listings that have it at around 280, which isn't too bad. Anyway, let's take a look at that MATX Riptide board. So you can get it with Wi-Fi 6E, of course. I wish there was more USB Type A ports. I think we all know that I was about to say that. VRM heatsink looks good. VRM itself, though, is slightly down... Is it? Oh, actually significantly downgraded. I guess that makes sense when the price is so low. How many layers is it? Oh, wait. They're not advertising an 8-layer PCB, so this is probably a 6-layer. That doesn't necessarily mean that this would have any issues with powering your CPU, though. Interesting that there's just a tantalum capacitor, like, hanging out by the CPU socket. I wonder what that's for. Especially on a motherboard this cheap. Like, there's just a tantalum cap over here. It might be for the SoC or something. Also, this, like array of multi-layer ceramics that Asrock is doing for some of their... Actually, they're kind of doing it for the whole thing here. And it still manages to squeeze in 4 SATA ports and troubleshooting LEDs down on the bottom edge. This PCIe slot layout for an MATX board is actually about as good as it's going to get. What's the PCIe slot assignment on this? This is not bad. I don't hate this. At least not immediately. It's 4.0 X16, yeah, 4.0 X4 off of the chipset, and then 3.0 by 1 twice. Not that you're going to be able to use those because your GPU is going to be there. You do get 2 M.2 slots, not 3. Am I right about that? Yeah, you get 2 M.2 slots. I'm surprised that we didn't get the bottom PCIe slot as by 4 from the CPU. Because I think they have lanes left over from the CPU. Realtek 2.5 gig LAN. What's the QVL look like? Oh, this is actually... Yeah, because I guess 6-layer PCB does that, doesn't it? Yeah. Huh. That makes sense. Like that's kind of my observed difference between like 6-layer boards on and 8-layer boards on Z690 with 12th gen Intel. So that actually makes sense that a 6-layer board would be worse than an 8-layer board for DDR5 overclocking. So that's almost certainly accurate, which also means like on one hand this is the cheapest like I think this is straight up one of the cheapest AM5 boards in general. Like even if I don't look at Asrock specifically. Where's Asrock? There we go. Yeah, it is actually just straight up the cheapest. And it's not immediately like it's not immediately terrible. The VRM actually looks like it could be like actually it should still be perfectly capable of powering a 7950X. This is actually very similar to the VRM on the B550 Steel Legend, except this actually looks like it has a better VRM heatsink. Yeah. Like this is a good VRM heatsink design. Like this style of VRM heatsink works really, really well in my testing. So, no, and it's on a 6-layer PCB. So this actually, like, I never figured out if the B550 Steel Legend is a 4-layer PCB or a 6-layer PCB. I've always suspected that it's a 4-layer PCB because it feels kind of thin, but I'm not sure. And Asrock doesn't I think Asrock advertises the layer count on their 6-layer boards, but not on their 4-layer boards. So, yeah, that's the other reason why I'm like it's probably a 4-layer because I can't find anything saying it's a 6. But anyway, so this is a 6-layer almost certainly. And that's not really like the issue is like what CPU would you put in this? Could you put a 7950X in it? Yes. Why would you do that though? I'm not entirely certain. Could you put a 7600X in it? Of course. Would that make sense? Yes, if the 13600K didn't exist. Unfortunately for AMD, the 13600K does exist, and so the 7600X doesn't really make any sense. And so that's kind of the awkward thing for me is like I am intrigued, but I'm not sure if this is a board that actually like makes a ton of sense right now for AM5. Because yeah, it's the cheapest AM5 motherboard in the UK and probably everywhere else in the world. But at the same time, what would you do with it? Like, it's not really. Like I don't know. And I kind of do I really want a motherboard that clocks memory worse than everything else does? Especially like since as far as I can tell, ASRock's entire lineup is 8-layer PCBs, isn't it? Isn't it? Oh no, this one has the wacky overview page. Okay, we're going to not do that one, but 8 layers. Though that, you know what, considering some of the other mistakes we've seen. Okay, okay, I'll take that this is an 8-layer PCB. 8-layer PCB. Eight-layer PCB again. Yeah. So, like, this board, in terms of memory overclocking, will be very different from, or Well, okay, maybe not very different, but it'll be different from everything else in Asrock's lineup. So from a perspective of like showing people what settings are possible on Asrock motherboards, it's utterly useless because it's just not comparable to anything else. That doesn't make it bad. Okay, it just means like for me, from a content production perspective, this board is awkward as hell because it's like this board, like whatever settings are the limit on this board are not necessarily going to be the limit on any other Asrock motherboard. So, yeah, that doesn't really make it a very sensible choice from that perspective. So I think I like the Pro RS best. Like, I like the PCIe slot layout on this a lot. The rear I/O could be better, but it's like even for me, and I use a lot of USB ports compared to normal people, this is actually enough. Or actually, I think I might even have like USB ports left over with this. Yeah. It still has 4 SATA ports instead of just 2 that you get on some of the B650 boards. There are troubleshooting LEDs. Thing I'm kind of upset about is it doesn't have that overly... Like, it doesn't have all of the extra multi-layer ceramics that some of the other boards have in the VRM. Right? Like, yeah, we have this over by the, what I think is the VDDIO phase. Oh, and there's a tantalum cap hanging out over here. I really wonder what that's for. I think it's probably for the SoC power rail. Same VRM as the Riptide, though. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same. Basically the same as the Steel Legend. Yeah, I think the Steel Legend is literally just 2 more power stages slapped onto the same controller as this. And then this is the same controller minus 2 power stages, I bet is how this is set up. And even compared to the, like, I also want to check the X670 Steel Legend, because it's like, I want the every Asrock motherboard is actually just this motherboard. motherboard. That would be ideal. This looks quite different. And there's nothing really interesting on the back from what I can see there. Man, X670E... Well, it's an X670 board, so yeah, those are just silly expensive. Man, this price... So the B650E Taichi, which... Oh, they haven't listed all the stores for that yet. Anyway, so... Certainly my favorite in Asrock's lineup is the Pro RS in terms of feature set, but even like a B650's Phantom Gaming Lightning, if you primarily just want more rear I/O stuff, like it does that. And VRM wise, this should be perfectly capable of powering a 7950X. In fact, it might even be possible to power a 7950X with this VRM and no heat sinks. I think the only board where that probably wouldn't work is the MATX Riptide, because that's on the 6-layer PCB. And it's also like 12 power stages and they're 50 amp power stages instead of 60s. So, yeah, and the main issue with a lot of these boards is like B650E Steel Legend is just like, it's 300 quid. It's like, it's a very expensive motherboard. And it doesn't really do, like, what does it even do? Oh, right, that doesn't work. I guess it adds an optical output compared to some of the other Asrock boards, like the... I think already by the Riptide you don't get an optical. Yeah, so the Riptide already doesn't have an optical output. So yeah, like I don't get why you would get like a B650E Steel Legend. Because as far as I can tell, it's probably the same VRM, just stretched out. You don't even get any SATA ports. The PCIe slot layout is actually just a downgrade from like the Riptide or the Pro RS or the... Well, no, the Phantom Gaming Lightning is actually the same layout. I don't like it's not a good layout though. So yeah, like, and then you get the silly expensive boards, which are the Taichis, and the B650 Taichi especially is just like I have no idea how that board could ever make sense, because like the thing is, this is basically just a massive, very expensive VRM. Like I have no doubts that most of the price, a lot of the price of this board is just justified by the price of the VRM, but it's like it's totally unnecessary. It doesn't do dual X8 anyway. I do wonder what is up with those inductors under that second X8 slot, like under the by 4 PCIe slot. And yes, you get an absolute ton of USB Type A ports, but like there's other ASRock motherboards that do that. Sure, they're not all like, what is it? Oh, I guess there's like a lot of 3.2 Gen 1. What a stupid port naming scheme. But like, yeah, okay, you get a lot more 3.2 Gen 1 than other motherboards, but yeah, and then 2.5 gig Intel LAN, 2.5 gig Intel Wi-Fi. Wait, I mean, not 2.5 gig, you get Wi-Fi 6E from Intel, which I think you get on every board, though. At least every board that has Wi-Fi. Right? Because, like, because for like a really long time, the default choice for Wi-Fi 6E was Intel Wi-Fi 6E. I guess there's more Wi-Fi 6E manufacturers now then. Yeah, so like that's the thing with AM5 is like the more expensive motherboards is just like a lot of them are just like, look, there's a lot more VRM for your 200-watt CPU. Why do you need, like, you don't need it. So yeah, I like the Pro RS. The live mixer, if it had more SATA ports, would definitely be on my list, but it has a grand total of 2, and that is not okay. The ITX looks interesting, unfortunately not very comparable to anything else in ASRock's lineup. And I do like I like the feature set of the X670E Taichi, but not enough that I'd be willing to pay that much money for one. So, uh, yeah. That's that's my thoughts on ASRock's AM5 motherboard lineup. Um, like honestly, the AM5 motherboards in general are just weird. Now that I think about it, because like the thing is like all your motherboard really needs to do is connect your other stuff to the CPU. So like your GPU, sound card, capture card, networking card, M.2 drives, like whatever, additional add-on devices you have, whatever USB devices you have, your memory. Um, and the thing with AM5 is like basically all of these motherboards are 8-layer PCBs using the exact same daisy chain topology, so they have the same memory overclocking capabilities. Ryzen doesn't pull that much power, so you don't really need that much VRM. Um, And you're just kind of left with this like situation where it's like, if you want to post code, you need to pay an insane amount of money. And if you don't want to post code, well, they're all basically the same thing, right? Unless you need like a very specific number of USB ports. And well, a specific high number of USB ports, right? And even then, like, this already does that. Like, there's a ton of USB Type A on this. And it has troubleshooting LEDs. It's just really ugly, and I don't like the PCIe slot layout. Like, yeah, this... So anyway, that's it. That's my thoughts on the Asrock AM5 lineup. Basically, if you want dual X8, you get a Taichi, and if you don't care about any of that, you get a Pro RS or a Phantom Gaming Lightning, in my opinion. Because the rest of the boards don't really make a ton of sense. And I'll probably test the Pro RS. And I'll also test it... Probably I'll also test it without VRM heatsinks. Because I would not be surprised if it was able to still... Like, I would expect it to end up getting very hot in that scenario. But I don't think it would get hot enough that it couldn't run a 7950X. So yeah, and so if this can, you know, power a 7950X with no heatsinks, then this thing can do it too. Because it's the same VRM but with heatsinks. So, or it should be the same VRM but with heatsinks. Anyway, that's it. So thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, hoodies, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. And I also have a Bandcamp, which you could check out if you're interested in listening to industrial noise. So yeah, there's links to all of that down in the description if you'd like to support the channel. And that's it for the video. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.